Warning: the following content deals with violent homicides. Listener discretion is advised. The mysterious double murder of Janine Lynn Johnson and Steven Glenn Taylor. Janine Lynn Johnson was born in Tarrant County, Texas on September 1st, 1979, to her parents John Nelson Johnson and Diana Lynn Gabehart. Steven Glenn Taylor was born in McKinney, Texas on January 12, 1970, to his parents Tyndall Lawrence Taylor and Gloria Ann Robertson. Janine attended South Grand Prairie High School, but at the age of 17, she would give birth to a son. 1 year later, she would marry the father. Unfortunately, about another year later, they would divorce. After this relationship, she would marry and divorce 3 more times by the time she was 28. Janine was a kind and caring person and still cared for her ex-husbands and still kept in touch with them. In fact, one ex-husband would financially help Janine when she needed it. She would eventually meet Steven and move to Ferris, Texas. I could find little about Steven's youth except his parents divorced when he was 4. I found he had lived in the southern Dallas town of Lancaster, Texas in the mid-2000s. A high school friend of mine said he had played softball with Steven and that they were bouncers together at a local country club called the Crystal Chandelier, which is no longer open. Steven would meet Janine and her son. Eventually, Janine would move into the South Church Street house with Steven, where they were making a quiet life with each other. Saturday, March 21st, 2009, Steven Glenn Taylor and Janine Lynn Johnson had attended a softball tournament. I am not sure whether it was a co-ed game or if it was just Steven playing and Janine was watching. The time for the game was unknown, but after the game, they came home to 404 South Church Street in Ferris, Texas. It is believed sometime between 7 and 8 p.m. Steven and Janine were due to play another softball game the next day, Sunday, March 22nd, 2009. Sunday came and it was time for the next game. Steven and Janine were a no-show and were not answering phone calls. Steven's brother was worried and he drove out to their house. The paper refers to the brother as Robert. It may be Robert Keith Taylor, who may also go by his middle name Keith. It's before 1:26 p.m. when Steven's brother shows up to the 404 South Church Street in Ferris, Texas. I've been trying to figure out if this is Sunday or Monday that the brother shows up, because early articles conflict with the more recent articles on the day. Both Steven and Janine's cars were parked at the house. The brother looked into the windows and thought he could see legs, but there was no movement. The brother started banging on the doors and windows, but there was no response. Steven's family members started showing up. The family saw a city worker traveling north on Church Street. The family members flagged down the city worker, Breezy Hart, and asked him to call the police. At 1:30 p.m., Ferris Pd are on scene with family members around the house. The 2 doors of the house were locked, and everybody was trying to find a way into the house. They finally were able to open a window. Some news stories say Steven's brother got in through the window and found the bodies. Some articles do not specify the person who gets in through the window and says that the person who gets inside opens the back door for the police to come in. Police feel this window was not used by the killer or killers. It was said that the house looked undisturbed and normal until they came to the master bedroom. It was a massacre. Blood was everywhere in the bedroom. Investigator Sam Love says they were killed with a sharp instrument. Some articles used the word stabbed and others used the word hacked. The facts are it was a horrifying crime scene. I'm wondering and a little bit worried on how many people came into the crime scene. Police were puzzled by the fact there was no evidence of forced entry. No weapons were found. No footprints. Police claim not one drop of blood was found outside the bedroom. No 911 calls were made by neighbors. All intersections and all local dumpsters were checked. It was said they inspected the locks on the doors to see if they had been picked, but they were so old and worn, the police were unable to tell. All keys were accounted for. Police say nothing was stolen, and they reference that Janine still had her gold necklace on. But murderdata.org lists 2 murders for the exact month, year, and in Ferris, Texas, as a homicide during a burglary, which doesn't mean anything was stolen, but it could mean that the police have some reason to think the murderer or murderers were there to steal something. Later in the day, Justice of the Peace Precinct 2 Jackie Miller Jr., who was called to the scene, stated at the time that this was the most gruesome murder scene in his 12 years serving Ellis County. Miller pronounced both Johnson and Taylor dead at the scene at 5:13 p.m. and ordered their bodies taken to the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office for an autopsy. Information from the Dallas Medical Examiner's Office was reported by news outlets differently. One report says Steven had a little more than 20 stab wounds and Janine had more than 48 stab wounds. Other reports say Steven had 70 stab wounds and Janine had 50 stab wounds. No matter the actual count, it was a horrible death by both victims. Both had defensive wounds. Police said they didn't have a chance and they were unable to get out of their beds. The medical examiner's office says the cuts were about 5 inches deep from a knife or dagger. The medical examiner believes there were different shaped blades used. This would make it more likely that there were 2 killers. The coroner released information to the papers that Steven had a stab wound that severed nerves in his spine that made him paralyzed. Steven would be unable to fight back. A cut in his groin is believed to be the fatal wound. Steven would bleed to death. Janine's death was horrifying, with her defensive wounds, and the early newspaper stories reported Janine's throat was slit. How this terrible murder has not gotten the attention it should is mind-boggling. Ferris, Texas is partly in Dallas County, so Ferris police contacted the Dallas County Sheriff's Office to process the crime scene. Also providing assistance on the call were members of the Ellis County Sheriff's Office and the Texas Rangers. Dallas County would have more experience and resources. It took several days for law enforcement to process the scene due to the brutality of the murders. Though no 911 calls were made in the neighborhood during the murder time frame, neighbors who lived across the street were interviewed and told police they saw a vehicle pull into the victim's driveway the night of the murder. The husband gave a vehicle description of a 1990s Dodge or Chrysler van and a description of the person driving. The Texas Rangers flew in a sketch artist. A sketch was made and put in the Waxahachie DAILYLIGHT newspaper. But the husband was later found to be unreliable and had drug issues. But the wife did see a car lot that night, and she is considered to be reliable. The way their driveways are situated to each other, the wife knew a vehicle had pulled into the victim's house. Another neighbor, whom I do not know where their house was located, claimed they heard a scream that night, but they did not report it. A couple weeks later, another man came forward as tips were coming in and said he was fixing to testify in a federal case. He believed the killers may have gotten the wrong address. The man said it could have been a botched hit intended for him. It was theorized by Gone Cold podcasts that the man who came forward may have lived on North Church Street with the same number as Janine and Steven's address. It is true that there is a 404 South Church Street and a 404 North Church Street in Ferris. I could find no criminal record for Janine or Steven. Also, I have never found an occupation for either of them. Janine's mother said Janine kept to herself, but somehow kept up with the goings-ons in the neighborhood. Steven had lived longer in Ferris than Janine and was involved with coaching youth sports and was said to be friends with the mayor of Ferris. Though an article I found in the Dallas Morning News said they had only lived at 404 South Church Street for a month, another article said they had Christmas there. I'm not sure which is correct, but I feel they had lived at the location longer than a month. The murders were devastating to Janine and Steven's family. Janine's 12-year-old son had bonded with Steven and considered him his best friend. Janine's son had experienced a rare time of stability when Steven came into his mom's life. Janine actually hosted the previous Christmas instead of going to other people's houses. The son could see how happy this made his mom. Janine's father, John Johnson, found out about Janine's death before his wife. It was other family members who told John about Janine's death. Unfortunately, John's in-laws had heard it on the news. Janine's mother, Diana Johnson, was coming home from work and got a call from John to hurry home. Diana was devastated, heartbroken, and confused when she was given the news of Janine's horrible death. Janine's son would have to wait in his room for his father to come home to find out what happened to his mom. While he waited, he listened to everybody weeping in the house. The son was devastated when his father told him his mother had passed away, especially since the son had recently been with his mom. Janine was only 29 at the time of her death. Steven's family were in total shock and knew nobody who would want to kill either of them. Steven was 39 at the time of his death. Steven's family would meet and have a celebration of his life in Red Oak at his sister's house. I believe Steven had 2 brothers and a sister, but this was all I could find on Ancestry. Steven had a group of close-knit family members who were nicknamed the Wreckers, and all were in attendance for his life celebration. A family member said the celebration of Steven's life would go on into the night as long as people wanted to stay. Over time, many leads were given, yet nothing has seemed to come of them. Ferris Pd has had a lot of employee turnover, and many officers left the force right after the murder. Early on in the case, $8,565.28 was allotted for DNA testing. Every time a new investigator had to restart from the beginning, one part-time investigator, Bob Allwart, who specifically came to the force to work on the cold cases, surprisingly found the case documents stored away in a drawer. FBI, Texas Rangers, Ellis County Sheriff's Office, Dallas County Sheriff's Office, and Ferris PD are some of the law enforcements that have been involved in this case. The case has been submitted to a cold case group that was formed in the 80s. Going over the Ferris records, the Sheriff's Association of Texas Cold Case Review Team in Austin noticed an article of clothing on a victim's body and was thought it may have evidence on it. They found out the article of clothing on Janine had not been tested and was sent to be tested at SWIFT's, the Southwest Institute of Forensic Sciences. Still, now, the volunteer detective has left the force. Another group of Ferris PD detectives are starting over, and they are not releasing any open records except for a one-page incident report. Ferris also has taken their evidence to a cold case overview organization, and they have told Ferris PD that they have done a reasonable job up to this point. It is my understanding that this organization will keep tabs on the case and make sure things are done properly. While this is going on, the families have to wonder, how come nobody has come forward, or how come no evidence has brought forth a suspect?
If you have any information, please contact Ferris PD at 972-544-2225. The department is located at 111 Ewing Boulevard in Ferris, Texas. Anyone with information can also contact the Ellis County Crime Stoppers at 972-937-PAYS. Callers can remain anonymous.